Wars fans, buckle up. We've got a ton of crazy stuff to get into in this video. We've got new reports about what exactly is happening with the newest Star Wars movie. You know, the one that had Damon Lindelof and then lost Damon Lindelof, and now it has Steve Knight. Oh man, there's a lot to get into about what exactly is happening with that film. We also have updates about what exactly is going to be announced at Star Wars Celebration and how Kathleen Kennedy's job rests upon Star Wars having a movie out in 2025. So we got to go over the new reports, and I'm going to sprinkle in a bunch of stuff that I've been hearing behind the scenes for the past year about what's really going on with Star Wars. And then I'll just kind of speculate at the end of the video and talk about how I think the fandom will actually handle this information and what is the future for Star Wars as a brand. Smash a freaking like on this video and let's begin. So I think first, we should probably TLDR what exactly I'm talking about when I talk about the Damon Lindelof Star Wars movie. Well, there was a Star Wars movie that's been in production for some time. A writer's room was assembled last year for this movie, and the big writer, the big name, the big brand attached to this film is Damon Lindelof. And just last week, we discovered that Damon Lindelof was no longer going to be writing that movie, and he walked away from the project. And it kind of seemed like the sky was falling, like Kathleen Kennedy was up to her same old tricks of absolutely not being able to work with people behind the scenes to get a movie off the ground. But late in the week, it was reported that Steve Knight, a writer most well known for the Peaky Blinders series, was now attached to make this new Star Wars film. And since all of that information came out, Jeff Snyder, the guy that originally broke that Lindelof was no longer on the movie, and frankly, the person that has been getting the most information about this particular Star Wars movie, that guy recently updated us all on the Above the Line podcast with John Roca. So I want to go over what he said in that podcast, but I urge you to go watch the podcast yourself. Like, just see for yourself what Jeff is saying, what John is saying in that podcast, and you can kind of maybe get your own meaning of things. But I'll do my best job right now to summarize what I think was actually revealed in that podcast. So the first thing that Jeff Snyder talks about was how he had a source reach out to him and essentially say that the draft that Lindelof turned in was not good. And this source suggested that if the project was better, they would have absolutely worked this out. But Jeff Snyder himself even admits in the podcast that that source is incentivized to make that the narrative. Essentially, this is probably somebody that wants to defend Disney and wants to defend Kathleen Kennedy and wants to make Damon Lindelof look bad in this situation. And of course, it is absolutely possible that the script itself was bad, and Lindelof is sort of known for subverting expectations, for doing some really weird stuff. That is the kind of writer that he is. So I can imagine it could be a scenario in which he turned in something that Kathleen Kennedy and other people at Lucasfilm just really didn't like. But it's what was revealed next that makes me bring that whole quality of the script thing into question, because it is being reported that Kathleen Kennedy hired the Miss Marvel director without Damon Lindelof's knowledge. And this was actually something that came from Roca during the podcast. This is something that he had heard from sources, and it seems like what happened was Kathleen Kennedy making decisions in a vacuum, and she apparently really wanted this Miss Marvel director to helm the project. Damon Lindelof doesn't really love the idea of that director taking his script and making essentially what he considers probably to be his movie. And the reason this is so significant, guys, is because Damon Lindelof is a big name, a big brand. When you hire him, you are not just hiring some writer. You are hiring a writer that comes with a massive following, a lot of attention, and also a lot of creative demands. Like, I would say that Lindelof is well within his rights to be working on this project, understand that his name is now attached to it, and have a say in who the actual director is going to be. Now, they actually implied during the podcast that this other writer, Stephen Knight, was brought on board super quickly because it is even possible that Kathleen Kennedy was talking to the Miss Marvel director and basically just knew that there was going to be some clashing between her and Lindelof and had possibly already even had conversations with Stephen Knight. This is not uncommon in the business, and so essentially it could be the case that no matter what Damon Lindelof Lindelof was going to turn in, they were going to reject it and go with a different writer. Now, they also discuss in the podcast how crazy it is that you wouldn't be able to get along with Damon Lindelof. He's apparently just a really sweet guy and very open to collaboration, and I would assume he was pretty good the entire way with the writer's room and everything like that. But Kathleen Kennedy is making executive decisions, and she's moving pretty quick with it, and it's possibly the case that they just had some friction between Lindelof, Kathleen Kennedy, and the director, and Kathleen decided to side essentially with the director. Now, the other thing that's fascinating about this is apparently, according to Jeff Snyder, they are going to announce 3 different Star Wars movies at Star Wars Celebration in just a few weeks, which is pretty crazy and does line up with some things that I have heard behind the scenes, but I'll talk about that more in a second, because the next piece of information is probably the most interesting. So according to Jeff Snyder, Kathleen Kennedy's job hangs in the balance, and if there is not a Star Wars movie released in December of 2025, she will be fired. That is apparently the ultimatum that Disney has placed upon her and upon Lucasfilm. And on top of that, apparently Disney has come in and told Lucasfilm that they need to do only Star Wars. They just need to completely focus on Star Wars. So the Indiana Jones show has likely been canceled. There was going to be a Disney Plus show, pertaining to Indiana Jones. That's canceled. This is also the reason that Willow was canceled. And this is a big Disney mandate. And I believe this. And here's the thing. Right now, Disney is in a pretty big crisis type of mode. Bob Iger comes back and retains the title of CEO. They unceremoniously get Bob Chapek out there on a Sunday. The stock price was in the toilet. Now it has recovered slightly since Bob Iger came back. But he has 2 years to get Disney back on track and find a successor to take over as the actual CEO for the future of the company. And things are bad. We just saw Victoria Alonso being fired. This is a Alan Berg, Bob Iger decision. It wasn't even Kevin Feige's call. So it's coming from the higher ups at Disney, and they are trying to send a message. And I think they're trying to get things back on track. So that's the latest information on what is going on. Now, there's like sort of good and bad here. I guess the good here is they did replace the writer very quickly, and they are going to go into production. And because all this pressure is on Kathleen Kennedy to essentially, either lose her job or not, they're going full steam ahead with this film. It's also kind of interesting that they're also going to announce 3 movies at Star Wars Celebration. So the sort of narrative that was out there that they would have nothing to talk about at Celebration, and that losing Damon Lindelof was going to throw the whole company into chaos once again, that's been quelled a little bit. So from some perspectives, that's the good news. Now, the bad news is, of course, you lost Damon Lindelof, who is this massive name. It's huge out there in the media. People are talking about it. And now you've got a movie coming out from the Peaky Blinders writer and the Miss Marvel director. I think both of these people are very talented, but they're not household names. They're not big brands, and that is weird. We're going to do the next big, incredibly important Star Wars movie with very much lesser known names. But now let me fill in like a little bit of the context here. Let me talk about all the things I've been hearing over the last year, and they're crazy. First, let's start by talking about the 3 different movies. I've been told this for some time, that you're going to get multiple movies announced very soon, and that they do have somewhat of a plan for these films. What I had heard is all of these movies were going to take place in a post-sequel trilogy era. They might not all be connected to each other. I don't think they're going to be an actually planned trilogy, but they will deal with the fallout of the sequel trilogy and of Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. So that tracks, and it's really interesting. Again, I'll talk about what I think this is going to do to the fandom in just a bit here, but let me just kind of continue to give the context. Next up, let's talk about this Kathleen Kennedy story. Now, this one's really weird for me because I had heard from some very reliable people and other people out there on the internet, like John Campia, have reported this as well, that the decision had already been made to get rid of Kathleen Kennedy this year in 2023. And so when I hear Jeff Snyder talking about how Kathy's job is on the line for the 2025 movie, I find that to be very weird because her contract is up in 2024. So they would have to extend her contract while also waiting to see if a movie was coming out in 2025 to fire her or not. So I don't know exactly what the truth of this is, but I think it's obvious that Disney is very upset with Kathleen Kennedy and Lucasfilm. They really want these movies to be coming out, which is a part of why they are pressuring so much to get that out there. So it is technically possible that they are turning the heat up on Kathy and everybody while they've already made the decision to get rid of Kathleen Kennedy. But I suppose it's also possible that they had conversations, and instead of just firing her and letting her go, they have set up this ultimatum, and they're trying to get her and the entire company to have this pressure to turn things around, and then maybe they'll look for a successor at that point. Like, maybe in certain circles at Disney, it's just known fact that they will be getting rid of Kathleen Kennedy, but perhaps the messaging from Disney to Lucasfilm is that that decision depends on whether or not Kathy can actually get some movies into production. So now let's talk about how this is all going to go down. Like, what do I think is going to happen to Star Wars and the Star Wars fandom? Well, I gotta be honest with you guys, I truly think they are absolutely and the biggest reason I feel this way is because Star Wars is now almost in the exact same position that they were in 2015 when Disney was hounding them to just get movies out. They took a long time, a big break, to sort of understand what the plan was and to build up some ideas. Now, it is possible that they have done that and they have this well-crafted universe and timeline for what happens after the rise of Skywalker, but that's not what any of the reports are indicating to me. The reports suggest that they've tried a ton of different things. Almost all of them have fallen through and failed for whatever reason, like the Kevin Feige thing, the Patty Jenkins thing, Rian Johnson, Dan and Dave, on and on. So all that stuff has failed, and it seems like now they're just pushing ahead in a really truncated time period to try to rush out a movie in 2025. And that is simply not a formula for success. That is exactly why the sequel trilogy had no discernible plan, no actual structure as an overarching story, and it really did change drastically from one entry to the next. On top of that, I almost don't think it matters what kind of talent would be behind the camera when essentially Lucasfilm is doubling down on the sequel trilogy, the worlds and characters that they created with the Star Wars license. And I just think there's going to be a large portion of the Star Wars fan base that completely rejects that outright. Now, it's Star Wars and it's a massive brand, and I think putting a movie out, you will see a ton of people that will go see it even if they are skeptical the entire way. But the Star Wars brand has taken such major damage over the last couple of years that even their hit show The Mandalorian is currently wildly underperforming compared to what it did in its second season 2 years ago. And although they've seemingly salvaged the production of this movie, it's still nothing that gives confidence to fans, and the conversations about losing Damon Lindelof and all of that have been incredibly negative online. And I just think at this point, if you were even the most optimistic kind of person, you would have to admit there's a large amount of skepticism that would come with Lucasfilm talking about how they're going to turn everything around or create all this awesome content. It just seems to me that your average fan out there would have a lot of disbelief and a lot of reasons to doubt that these new Star Wars movies would be really good. I mean, that is literally the reputation that Lucasfilm has earned over the past couple of years. But either way, Star Wars Celebration is right around the corner, and we will get some announcements then, and then we'll actually see how the fan base reacts to it, and whatever happens, we'll go on this wild and crazy ride together. Smash a like on this video if you liked it. Chime in down in the comments if you have some thoughts about what I shared. And if you want to watch more, why not check out this video I just did breaking down some incredible new reveals about the MCU show Secret Invasion.